أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والنازعات غرقا والناشطات نشطا والسابحات سبحا فالسابقات سبقا فالمدبرات أمرا يوم ترجف الراجفة تتبعها الرادفة قلوب يومئذ واجفة أبصارها خاشعة يقولون أئنا لمردودون في الحافرة أئذا كنا عظاما نخرة قالوا تلك إذا كرة خاسرة فإنما هي زجرة واحدة فإذا هم بالساهرة هل أتاك حديث موسى إذ ناداه ربه بالواد المقدس طوى اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقل هل لك إلى أن تزكى وأهديك إلى ربك فتخشى فأراه الآية الكبرى فكذب وعصى ثم أدبر يسعى فحشر فنادى فقال أنا ربكم الأعلى فأخذه الله نكال الآخرة والأولى إن في ذلك لعبرة لمن يخشى أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها رفع سمكها فسواها وأغطش ليلها وأخرج ضحاها والأرض بعد ذلك دحاها أخرج منها ماءها ومرعاها والجبال أرساها متاعا لكم ولأنعامكم فإذا جاءت الطامة الكبرى يوم يتذكر الإنسان ما سعى وبرزت الجحيم لمن يرى فأما من طغى وآثر الحياة الدنيا فإن الجحيم هي المأوى وأما من خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى فإن الجنة هي المأوى يسألونك عن الساعة أيان مرساها فيم أنت من ذكراها إلى ربك منتهاها إنما أنت منذر من يخشاها كأنهم يوم يرونها لم يلبثوا إلا عشية أو ضحاها صدق الله العلي العظيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بانو کہاں تلاش کرے اپنے لال کو جنگل میں مار ڈالا ہے، جنگل میں مار ڈالا ہے، زہرا کے آل کو بانو کہاں تلاش. شبیر دل کو تھام کے غش خاں کے گر پڑے، دیکھا جو خون میں غرق نبی کے جمال کو، بانو کہاں تلاش. شبیر لا رہے ہیں میدان سے دیکھیے، اپنے ضعیف کاندھوں پہ 18 سال کو بانو کہاں تلاش. شبیر میرے پاس ہے، صدقے کو بس یہی جھولے سے لا کے دے دیا، بانو نے لال کو بانو کہاں تلاش. زینب کے ساتھ روتی ہے، سب مل کے بیویاں، جب دیکھتی تھی روز وہ وقت زوال کو، بانو کہاں تلاش. بازار شام میں اسیروں کا قافلہ عابد نہ بھول پائے کبھی اس خیال کو بانو کہاں تلاش لیلا دعائیں کرتی رہی بعد کربلا یا رب جدا نہ کرنا کسی مسئلہ کو بانو کہاں تلاش بمحمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jamia wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumeen listed on the screen as well as all other marhumeen. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Dua Shifai Mariz is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. Amma yujibu al-mustarra idha da'ahu wa yakhshifu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah. Let us now invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come forward for tonight's Majalis. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام التحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. مؤمنين مؤمنات Brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we pray that everybody is safe and has been safe and is slowly recovering after the hurricane, inshallah. We pray for those who are still in the process of recovering. Outside of the 14 Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam, who by default we celebrate and commemorate their wilada, right, their birth anniversary, their shahada, their death anniversary, there are certain people outside of those definite Ahlul Bayt. We extend it out a little bit and we commemorate and celebrate the lives of a certain few other individuals. And the reason some of these other individuals are included is because they share some unique, deep, spiritual personality traits with the rest of the 14 Ma'asumeen that binds them and ties them together. One of those traits is the trait of hijrah, of migration. Now, when we hear the word hijrah or hijrat, migration, obviously just the idea of going from Mecca to Medina, right? The hijrat of the Prophet and the ashab at that time. That's the first thing that comes to our mind. But the reason why we honor somebody like, say, the Masuma al-Qum is because of the hijrah that she went through herself as well. And it's not just, as we'll talk about tonight, it's not something physical, it's beyond that. That is one level of hijrah, but usually there's something beyond and beneath or even higher as terms of its spiritual level, behind a physical migration. When that takes place, you see that there's some other secrets that we can learn from these great personalities. Inshallah ta'ala, that is our topic for tonight. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, as we all know, there's different levels, different types of hijrah. The lowest, the simplest form, the most obvious one that we all know is hijratul makani, right? A physical, geographical hijrat, moving from one place to another. And of course, this begins in Islamic history with the Prophet and his companions moving from Mecca to Medina. Now, in our riwayat, sometimes hijrah, this physical hijrah is used as a fadila. It's fada'il for some of the ashab. And it's not just the fact that they moved. There's something deeper there, but even the physical nature of their hijrah represented something. So many of these companions, for example, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, Ja'far al-Tayyar, as we refer to him, right? The brother of Imam Ali alayhi salam. He was one of these ashab who they say is hajara al-hijratain. Somebody who performed two hijras. So it wasn't just somebody who went from Mecca to Medina. Some of these ashab were characterized by the fact that they did two hijras. So okay, one of them was clearly the Mecca to Medina one, right? If you did that, then that gained you a certain fazilat. But there was another one too, and the other famous one that we should all know from our Islamic history is obviously when many of the Muslims, if not all of them, were being oppressed and persecuted and sanctioned within Mecca. Where else did many of them end up going? Right? Habasha, meaning Abyssinia, right? They were sent to where Najashi was. So many of these companions went from Mecca to Abyssinia, to Habasha, and then made their way to Medina, or back to Mecca, then to Medina. So these companions, who again were led by Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, they were known as those who hajar hijratain, or hajra hijratain, those who migrated twice or performed these two different migrations. Obviously, that's one kind of in the inception of Islamic history. The more famous hijras that we are used to, the ones that bring to our minds and our hearts a sense of discomfort, right? That brings us an emotional connection, is the hijrah that we think about when we think of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Of course, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, along with his family, their hijrah, at least for the men, was one type. From Medina towards Mecca, from Mecca trying to get towards Kufa, but of course ending up in Karbala. Now, for the men, or the vast majority of them, that is where their hijrah ends, right? Physical one. For the women and children, and of course Imam Sajjad and, according to riwayat, at least one or two other males, they continued on their hijrah. So they started in Medina, again, ending up at Karbala. From there, we all know famously, of course, from Kufa to Sham to Karbala, from most of the riwayat. And then finally, from Karbala, back to Medina. So they made a full 360, right? All the way back around. So this was another very physical hijrah, but it's not the physical movement. I mean, yeah, that itself was very difficult for them, but it's what it represented that brings to us, so many things in our minds, right? And then, of course, the reason we honor somebody like Bibi Fatima al-Masuma Qum, right? Masuma Qum, one is because famously she's making this hijrah herself too. She's also leaving her homeland of Medina and trying to set out towards Khurasan to meet with her brother, of course, who is Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And as we all famously know, she was not able to meet her brother in Khurasan, right? She was their caravan. There was different caravans, but her specifically, they were attacked along the way, and that's why she was attacked either right outside of Qum, we'll say, and then the Shias grabbed her, took her to Qum, and that's where she is buried right now. Inshallah, may Allah give us all the tawfiq to go and perform her ziyarah, inshallah. So that's, again, there's a physical hijrah there, but it represents something deeper. And I've mentioned all these things, and I haven't told you what it really represents, but I want to outline at least the physical ones, right? Hijratul Makani first, then we're going to go back, if we have time, inshallah, and see what really is this spiritual, deeper quality that's binding all this stuff together. Now, outside of this, there's one other one that I want to mention, a physical one. And this one will start the conversation about the different layers and levels of hijrah that exist. So, in Sham, we know that there's many famous khutbahs that are given there, one by Bibi Zainab, and of course, one famous one given by Imam Zain al-Abidin, alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. And in this, there's different riwayat explaining his khutbah, right, when he was there. In some of the versions that exist in some manuscripts, in some of the parts there, when he describes his lineage, he wants to describe his fadilat, right? Why Imam Sajjad, in front of everybody, right? Why was this such a terrible thing that Yazid had done to him, done to the Ahlul Bayt? So we know this famous, Abnu Makkah wa Mina, these ideas, right? So he's talking about who is his lineage, who is he connected to? So in one version, he is, of course, describing Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he begins to say, أَنَا ابْنُ مَنْ ضَرَبَ بَيْنَ يَدَيْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ بِالسَّيْفَيْنِ. He says, I am the son of the one who, with Rasulullah, with two swords, which they say means dhul fiqar, was there fighting alongside Rasulullah the whole time. Right? He's like, I'm that person's son, who was striking his sword there constantly. وَطَعَنَا بِرُمْحَيْنِ. And his spear was being raised and was attacking those who, as he was alongside with Rasulullah. Right? So he's mentioning that, my great-grandfather, Imam Ali, he's the one who was side by side with Rasulullah, right? So this is my fadilat. This is who I'm coming from. And these are the people, you Yazid, you people of Sham, this is who you've gone after. But then, it's a long part here, but the part that we're concerned with is this here. وَهَاجَرَ الْهِجْرَيْنِ. And I am also the son of the one who did two hijrats. I said, okay, this idea of hajara al-hijrain or hijratain, we just mentioned this before, didn't we? That some of the companions of Rasulullah, they were those who hajara al-hijratain. They did two hijras. The one famous one, obviously, is Makkah to Medina, which obviously Imam Ali did the same thing. But Imam Ali did not go to Habasha. He didn't go to Abyssinia. So what is the second one that he's mentioning here? It's not directly mentioned here. But what ulama say is the only real hijrah that we can derive and we can speculate that he's talking about is moving away from Medina to Kufa. That was this famous hijrah that Imam Ali made. Obviously because of the situation of that time, of the fitna that was happening between the Muslims, Imam Ali was so bad he had to shift the headquarters of the Islamic Empire from, at that point, which was, for a long time was Medina, shifted over towards Kufa. And this itself has a representation, is that Islam was so far from the center, right? Medina, right? Madinatul Rasul, the city of the Prophet, the city of Islam. Islam had shifted so much because of the previous khulafa, because of these previous false, corrupt governors and leaders. It had shifted so much that not just a physical hijrah of people moving, but moving to Kufa and having the headquarters of the Khilafah and Imama moving towards Kufa represented something deeper as well. And that is going to lead us into our next discussion about what beyond a physical hijrah gives value to a physical hijrah, right? Because look, many of the ashab, they went from Makkah to Medina too, right? They were muhajirun, weren't they? Alongside the Prophet, they left Mecca, they left behind their belongings and everything, they came to Medina. But many of these were the same ones, again, who were present in present in Ghadir and then in Saqifa. And constantly, over and over again, were not giving the Khilafah or giving Imam Ali his due right. So they said this hijrah that they moved from Mecca to Medina was meaningless. It had no value because they weren't sticking to the deeper Islamic values. So there's something beyond a physical, a makani sort of movement here and there. And this is something that you and I can understand too. Either you yourselves or our parents or grandparents, most of us have this concept of physical hijrat in our minds too. Right? Either, again, you yourselves or people that we are related to, again, whether our parents, grandparents, etc., have either done one or multiple hijrats, right? Multiple levels of migration, physically speaking. Right? So whether it's from India, Pakistan, that region, and then spreading out either directly to Europe and North America, or maybe stopping off in, Africa and then moving over, right? These were various hijrats that were being performed. People from obviously the other Islamic lands like Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan, places like that. People have left everything behind, made this hijrat, emigrated from that place where it was their homeland. They left behind everything and now they've moved over here. Does that automatically, again, because there seems to be something that in the riwayat, there is some sort of fadilat within moving. But just moving by itself can't be enough because we know many who have moved over here, who've moved over to the West, and they've lost their iman completely. Whereas if they had remained, maybe in Africa, maybe in Pakistan, in Iraq or Iran or India, wherever it was, maybe they would have held on to their iman. Or maybe they held on to their iman to some degree, but they're struggling. And had they remained in their original homeland, maybe their iman would have gone higher. But over here, maybe they're drowning. Maybe it's very difficult. So it's not just the physical movement. There has to be something behind it. Right? So what are those things behind it? In there we see in many other riwayat that there are different types and different layers of hijrat being mentioned, which show us that beyond the physical one, they have to be backed up by other types of hijrat. What are those other levels? Inshallah, we'll start with this first riwayah from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. There's many lines in this hadith. I'm only taking the last line because that's what's relevant to us. He's describing different characteristics of groups. He mentions mu'mineen and muslimin. That's not our concern right now, so I'll jump to the last line, where he describes who is a muhajir. And if you'll notice, he's not talking about somebody who moves from point A to point B, obviously. So what does he say? وَالْمُهَاجِرْ مَنْ هَجَرَ السَّيِّئَاتِ. A muhajir is somebody who does hijrat of sayyi'at, of evil, of guna, of marsiya. And then continues, وَتَرَكَ مَا حَرَّمَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. And he leaves behind and tosses aside everything that Allah has made haram. Now, the word hijrat, again, in our minds, just means moving around, right? Moving from one place to another. The original meaning of hijrat actually means to shun, to reject, and to push away something. Normally, the meaning of hijrat is not just that you're going from one place to another, but it's that something of value is usually being left behind in the original place when you move to the next. So now let's go back. When the people in Mecca are leaving behind physically the place of Mecca and moving to Medina, besides their belongings, besides their families sometimes, besides everything they grew up with, their cultures, what they're really leaving behind is the kufr, in the area of kufr, biladul kufr. That's what they're leaving behind. The actions that they used to be a part of before they became Muslims. They said, look, this is what we are attached to now. We're leaving biladul kufr to biladul iman. We're leaving Mecca, which is representative of kufr and shirk and everything which has destroyed our soul, and we're moving away to a place led by Rasulullah so that we can thrive in a place where now we have an environment where we can grow spiritually. So the first level of that is Rasulullah saying that the first level of a muhajir is somebody this first level is hijratul af'ali. It's in your actions. That first level of hijrat, again, beyond the makani and the physical, geographical, is that you shun and you move away from one place, which is the place of guna, marsiya, and sin, of bad actions, bad akhlaq, and you shift to a place which you have a level of taqwa, where you care about what you do, you care about your actions, you care about the consequences of what you say, what you do, and everything. Right? That's a very simple level. If you accept Islam, then obviously you should say that. Now, where there is a problem, however, is where somebody, they accept Islam, for example, Maybe even they physically move from one place to another, but they don't actually end up leaving aside un-Islamic or non-Islamic actions. Now, why would that happen? Well, first, before we go to that, I want to go to Allama Majlisi, rahmatullah alayh. I want to go to and just quickly read through his commentary on this specific riwayah. When he talks about, what is this idea? What is a muhajir? So he says, what is this idea of muhajir? He says, it means that a muhajir whom Allah has praised, right? Because there's muhajirun who Allah doesn't care about. He hasn't praised them. A muhajir that Allah has praised is not limited to one who emigrates from Makkah to Medina before Fath al-Makkah, the conquest of Makkah, or from their desert, like these Bedouins who left their deserts and came to Medina. He said, physical stuff is not the criteria. Or from a land of kufr, when they were in fear of oppression and corruption, and an inability to express the sha'air of Islam openly. This part is relevant for us, by the way, so let me read that again. He's saying that this is not the quality of a praised muhajir. It's not somebody who simply moves away from a place of kufr because of fear of dhulm, because they were being oppressed, or there was corruption there, or that there was an inability to express openly the sha'air of Islam. He said, this is not the definition of somebody who's praised in terms of their muhajir. He said, these are commonly understood meanings. He's like, but no, that's not what's being meant over here. Now, for many of us, let me pause here, that might be the reasons that some of us have left. Maybe not everybody in this room, but other countries where people were coming from, some, for example, when they left Saddam's Iraq, when they were not allowed to openly express, right? They couldn't do ziyarah openly, for example. Or certain countries that did not allow azadari to happen in the open. So many people, allegedly, for that reason, left, and again, there was obviously corruption and oppression happening too. They left those lands and came somewhere and said, aha, now we are in the West, and alhamdulillah, land of the free, home of the brave, and all that good stuff, and now we are openly able to express whatever we want. Alhamdulillah. Right? God bless America, all that good stuff. Allama Majlisi is saying, no, that's not the definition here. That's your intention, sure, but that's not what's being meant over here. Let me continue his commentary. Rather, it includes one who does hajra an sayyi'at, meaning he shuns, rejects openly, rejects evil. Now again, let's put it back in our scenario. We're here, we've got our Islam. Are we openly rejecting some of the evil that's taking place in society right now? Or do we find ourselves, sometimes, at least if you're being neutral, that's fine, right? We're being quiet on issues, okay, that's understandable. But we're seeing some people who, instead of remaining quiet, at the very least keeping this, let's say, anger or hatred and shunning evil in their hearts, instead they're openly using the minbar, using pulpits, using these places that are supposed to be representative of Islam, and they are praising these things instead. They are praising, sayyi'at. They're praising guna, and they're praising fisq and fasad. That's what's happening now. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, he says, rather, it includes one who shuns evil deeds. That's what hijrah means. For the merit of hijrat. What's the fazilat of hijrat? According to this hadith, is only due to it being a means, a wasila, for doing this bu'd, tabarri, or tabarra, if you want to use it, the way we mispronounce it, keeping away and distancing ourselves from all forms of kufr. And any sort of act of kufr, or disobedience, and somebody not obeying Allah. Everything. Even if somebody is not Muslim and they're still disobeying Allah, we still have to keep our distance from that. Now, we're not subjecting people, we're not saying, no, you're going to go to hell. We're not saying that, but we have to keep some sort of distance there. Right? We don't just join them in every single parade and things like that and say, yeah, we're going to raise up your flags too. Right? What's going on? That's not what we came here for. Now, again, why we came here for, it's another separate discussion. Let me continue his commentary. Therefore, there is no merit, no fadilat, for one who does hijrat out of nifaq, or who's in themselves, they're in a state of kufr, meaning that they have this Islam, maybe somewhere within them, but when they come out in the open in a place like this, they hide it, and they lie about the truth of Islam. Like, and he gives the example, like the muhajirun who took the haqq of the imams of Ahlul Bayt, who were the majority, unfortunately, right? Many of these individuals, we know, from the pre-Umayyad to the Umayyads and the Abbasids, every single one of them. So, the person who shuns and rejects kufr, who rejects sayyi'at and evil deeds, who rejects and shuns away unrestrained jahl and ignorance, and make sure that they themselves don't go astray and they push away anything that will lead them astray, even if they actually don't physically move. This one who is a person who actually gets this hijrat, which has fadilat to it. This is how Allama Majlisi explains this hadith of the Prophet. Now, why is it that sometimes, because a lot of us might be saying, yeah, I might be subject to this, where there's clearly a lot of evil going on right now. Right? We talked a little bit about this post Roe v. Wade, how that was a big issue. And there's always something going on where Muslims are just getting, split up into these camps of, it's clear there's one side and another. And obviously now we're talking about this hijab enforcement in Iran, right? That's now the clear issue, which inshallah will be, right, in the various sessions that we'll be having. We're going to open it up a little bit more. But even there you see that, so-called Shia speakers are saying some incredibly concerning things, right? Using, again, the pulpit of the Prophet, of the Ahlul Bayt, using the mimbar, people who are clearly unqualified, and they're explaining things that are clearly antithetical to Islamic teachings. That's a problem, right? We're told, look, hijrat, right, you might have exoterically, physically speaking, you might be in a place where there's Islam there, right? What more Islamic place is there than in front of the Kaaba? Is there anything? It's Baytullah, right? It's Allah's house. You have these prophets buried there. Or Medina, right? You have the Ahlul Bayt, right? Rasulullah's buried there. You have the Imams buried there. These are holy places. But who is it guarded by? By munafiqeen. People who are ready to, open concerts, gambling. It's a problem, right? Well, what sort of Islam is that? So that's very clear for, Shias have been calling this out for years. Sunnis finally, I think they got the message, and now they're finally calling out the Al Saud too. But that's a very easy example. What happens with our own places, right? What so-called masajid, right? In North America, right? They have the physical, right, things. It's nice. It's called a masjid and everything. But the people who are representing it, who are speaking on behalf of Islam, again, assuming they're qualified, but many places don't have that as well, the things that they're speaking about are never sourced from the Quran and never sourced from the Ahlul Bayt. It's people's own sort of ideas. And this leads us to the next sort of hijrat, which is the biggest problem that we've had since we've made our physical hijrat over here. And this one again, we're going to grab from a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Let me summarize so far. The first level that we talked about, the easy one, the obvious one, is hijratul makani. Physically just moving from one place to another. Then we said, okay, behind that, at least at one level, we have hijratul af'ali, right? Which is moving away and shunning and rejecting evil, guna, bad akhlaq, and all of that. And we went through alama much of that. Then we have a tougher one. And again, the reason why it's so tough for us sometimes sometimes we ourselves have a problem with our own guna and marsiya. But let's just say we're okay with that. We don't do guna or not too much. We're okay. But we have a problem calling out evil when we see it. We have a problem calling out speakers when they clearly are rejecting clear Islamic teachings. Why is that? Well, this leads us to the tougher one, which is hijratul i'tiqadi. Hijra in ideology. Ideological or theological hijrat. So what does this hadith say? Man kanat hijratuhu ilallah wa rasuli fahijratuhu ilallah wa rasuli. Now, when I translate this first line, it's not going to make any sense. But you'll see why in a second. So the Prophet is attributed to have said, whoever performs a hijrah, this migration or emigration, from or towards Allah and His Prophet, then he has performed his hijrat towards Allah and His Prophet. What does that even mean? When you go to the second line, then it's going to give it meaning. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِي لِمَالِهِ يُصِيبُهُ أَوْ إِمْرَئٍ يُصِيبُهَا. So whoever does hijrat for the sake of money, or for the sake of marriage, for the sake of a human being, a person, then they will get to that. Meaning they'll get their money, or they'll get married, whatever. Right? That's what the context over here is. Somebody moves because of marriage, said, okay, so you'll get your spouse, you'll get hitched, or if you move into hijrat because of money, Allah will give you that too. But what does He end with? فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. Whatever you do hijrat to, that's what you're going to end up reaching. So now the first line makes sense. What it seems is that Rasulullah is saying that beyond the idea of physically moving from one place to another, beyond this simple idea of, okay, I'm not sinning anymore, beyond the idea of shunning things, behind all of that, at a deeper level, a spiritual, psychological level, is something in our theology, it's in our ideology, in our philosophy. Is have I moved to a place where before it was my own ideas, my own thoughts, or some other ideology. Maybe I was worshiping my culture, maybe I was worshiping some deformed, deficient form of religion. I have to leave that aside and move towards Allah and His Prophet, to what they describe as deen. And Rasulullah is saying, if you come and your niyat is that I want to reach Allah and His Prophet, then Rasulullah is saying that's what you're going to get. If you actually make a proper niyat, you follow the path, right? Sirat al-Mustaqim, fi sabilillah, all of that. You actually set out, your niyat and intention is to get to the Prophet, to get to Allah, then that's what you're going to reach. But if your true niyat was something else, anything else, he says, look, if you went and you traveled physically or actions, if it was because of money or because of a person, anything else, then that's what you're going to get. Apply to our situation right here. Many individuals, why did they leave homelands? Did they come here because I'm getting closer to Allah when I come over here, right? By settling in Orlando? I mean, you can nod your head, but I know that you're lying. That's not the case. I mean, we know that. The vast majority, without saying everybody, the vast majority moved for economic reasons. They wanted, economic opportunities. They couldn't find anything in Pakistan or India or Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan or wherever they came from. And they came over here instead. Now again, maybe it was physical oppression. Again, that is one reason, but that means you weren't actually going towards the Prophet and Allah. There was something deeper in your mind. Now, yes, that can be corrected. We can reshift and reorient our hijrah. That's fine. But the initial niyat, perhaps that's why we're having so many issues in our i'tiqad right now, in our aqidah. Every day, every place I go to, every single community, same exact thing. Our youth, we're losing our youth. I'm like, okay, why did you come here in the first place? I asked the adults, straight up. Why did you move from your country over here? Be honest. And they all say the same thing. Better economic opportunities or education or something like that. Okay, you came for education. Did you get your degree? Alhamdulillah, I got my degree. Wonderful. Did you get a good job? I got a great job. Alhamdulillah. Then you have followed this hadith then. Because exactly what your niyat was, you got it. Yusibaha, that's exactly what the Prophet said. How many people actually said, no, I'm coming here. Again, I don't know who's going to come here to grow spiritually necessarily, but maybe some person's like, you know what? It's like you will decide instead of swimming in the shallow, I'm going to dive right into the deep end, right? Where it's difficult to grow spiritually, that's where I want to go. Who thinks like that? I don't know. Maybe somebody does. Okay, fine, that's when you're going to get your growth. Maybe that's what you'll do. Or you have some who, they traveled from, let's say, Pakistan, India, Iraq, or Iran, or Afghanistan, wherever, who, let's say, studied in the Hawza, and they said, look, we are better off over here Islamically, spiritually, but we decided to come to the West because we have to do tabligh or something like that. Right? There are some who are like that too. And again, maybe because economic conditions are better. I mean, some of them are like that too, but let's not judge their aqidah and their niyat, I don't know. But a lot of the Iranian scholars, right, whenever I talk to them, one of the first things they would say whenever they came to me and found out I was from America, they'd say, hey, can you get me a visa over there? I'd tell, all the other students, they would, try to be very calm and say, it's very difficult. I'm sorry, I can't help you out. You guys know me, I'm completely bi-akhlaq, and I was just blunt with them. Whenever any of these students would come to me, Iranian students, and say, hey, can you get me a visa? I said, no. Even if I could, I wouldn't get you one. They were just like, what are you saying? Why not? I said, look at your own country. Don't you think you need to stay here to do your tabligh? What are you going to do in America? And plus, usually their English is really bad. I said, look, besides the fact that your English is terrible, what culture do you really understand in the West? Do you have any idea? You can spend 20, 30, 40 years living here, you still won't understand the culture. It's not going to happen. So why don't you stay where you are, right, in your country, and you handle it over here? Because it's clear that, as we can see, that there are some youth, not the majority, like Western media would like us to believe, but there are some people, young, adult, old, who have trouble understanding Islamic principles. That's why you see some of the issues that are going on there. So why don't you stay here, fix your own stuff. Let me go take care of, what's going on over there. And that's why I came back over here, I guess, right? Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We ourselves understand this concept at a deeper level too. When we are surrounded by people who are not of the same aqidah, i'tiqad, theology, ideology as us, don't you feel a little bit uneasy sometimes? Right? Even in like a certain, what do you say, baraza, whatever, a group of friends, like the conversations that go on, you're like, I don't want to hear this stuff. So you want to just get up and leave. You want to do hijrat from that baraza, right? Or let me give you a very, very clear example. Hijrat from WhatsApp groups. It's very clear that certain groups have a different definition of what the word emergency means. Some people think emergency means, thumbs up, jazakallah, stickers and things like that. No, that's not an emergency. You don't have to share these things, right? I think you know what I'm talking. I think you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, then Allah has saved you from this great, great torture and punishment. But I think maybe in the future we may need to set up two groups based on, I think, age level, right? One age level seems to understand the word emergency as whatever comes to your mind. And another group says, no, emergency means things that are of dire consequence and actually an emergency. So maybe going forward we need to set it up like that. But you can tell some people were like, I don't want to be in this WhatsApp group anymore because this is really, really difficult. It's clear. The same way, inside the heart of somebody who's really a muhajir, when they are seeing that there is an issue within them, when they see that around them, there are people who don't have the same aqeedah and ideology as them, there's a natural propensity and want to move away from that idea. And there are even fiqh principles that go along with this too. And inshallah, maybe in another session, I'll be able to go through that. How it's haram, shar'an, it's haram to go to a place physically or even theologically to a place that is inviting or it's conducive towards pushing you towards jahiliyyah. In our fiqh books, one of the famous questions that's asked, you can see in Q&As as well. Is it allowed for us to move to the West? And it's based on this principle, where they say, if you can hold on to your aqeedah, if you can practice everything properly, you can raise a family properly, then fine. If not, it's haram. Based on fiqh principle, you can't move here. And in fact, it's wajib for you to go back to a place where you can practice. This is shar'an. I'm not even talking about akhlaq or irfan, spirituality, anything like that. This is just fiqh, 101, that's it. And of course, there's a higher level, which we won't have time to talk about, but this is more of the irfani level, of moving hijrat, what they call hijrat al-nafsani, moving from a place where you are, from your ego, and going to fana fillah, and removing and destroying your ego altogether. So we don't have time for that. Inshallah, maybe on another night, we'll move to that. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So to quickly recap, we talked about hijrat being a common thread and element that exists between all great spiritual personalities among the 14 ma'asumeen and the other Ahlul Bayt. We gave some examples of physical hijrat, but behind that we talked about how one level is af'ali. Besides moving from one place to another, we have to move away, according to the Prophet, from haram actions, obviously. But that also means to shun those actions too, to reject everything openly. The second level was i'tiqadi, theological, ideological. Saying, look, I have to reject everything that is un-Islamic and non-Islamic. And we're seeing in our day and age that people might call themselves sheikhs or speakers or mulanas or whatever they're known as, but what they are preaching is not Islamic aqidah. They're preaching some other random liberal, secular, individual stuff. That has nothing to do with it. And they are abusing the pulpits by doing something like that. And finally, the last one, the fiqhi principle we didn't talk about, and the irfani principle we didn't talk about, and inshallah, we can leave that for another night. And of course, we finally end by tying it back to the highest level of all, which brings us back to the discussion of Bibi Masuma. What ties and binds together all levels of hijrat, whether it's moving away from sins, whether it's changing your aqidah from false aqidah towards true Islamic aqidah, whether it's destroying your ego, what is it? Every single true hijrat has to be founded upon the bunyad and the foundation of wilayah. If you don't have hijratul wila'i, then your hijrat means nothing. We know from the famous riwayat that any action without wilayat is tossed back. It's not accepted. So when we see the actions of Bibi Zainab and her hijrat, it's not a hijrat, well yeah, she's forced, but she didn't have to leave Medina initially to come with Imam Hussein, but because of her connection to wilayah, she wants to join the caravan of love. She acts as a support to Imam Hussein and then subsequently to Imam Sajjad, supporting wilayah. Those who joined the Prophet in hijrah, they're supporting wilayah, truly supporting it. Imam Ali's hijrat, moving from place to place, especially to Kufa, is to re-establish a firm place of wilayah in Kufa because it had been abandoned in Medina. And finally, Bibi Masuma. This is not somebody who's heartbroken because she lost her brother and wanted to get him back, but this is somebody who said that the Shias are not supporting my brother, I have to go and support him. I have to go support my wali and my imam. If that means leaving behind everything that I know and love, my own watan, my own homeland, it means nothing to me. I give everything back to Allah. This means nothing to me. What a difficult life that she had. Besides this link in spiritual qualities, the Ahlul Bayt are also linked in their masa'ib too. From a young age, they say Bibi Masuma was attached, highly attached to her father, Imam al-Kadhim. And in those times when she learned and was spiritually growing with him then, she was maybe only 6 years old according to some riwayat, where he was taken by Harun and forcibly taken to the other areas. So she lost her father at a young age, just like Bibi Sakina lost her father at a young age. But the difference here is that Bibi Sakina knew that her father was going out to the battlefield. Bibi Masuma, young age, this young girl, doesn't understand what's happening here. She sees and is hoping. And they say that sometimes the maids in the house, in the middle of the night, sometimes in the morning, they'd come out and they would catch Bibi Masuma sleeping in the garden, sleeping outside. And they'd ask her, Sayyida, why are you sleeping out here? What are you doing over here? She says, I'm waiting for my Baba. I'm waiting for him to come home. He should be home here. It's been so long. When is he going to come home to me? Even Sakina didn't say something like this. This is the heartbroken tale of Bibi Masuma, waiting year after year after year for her father, Imam al-Kadhim, and he doesn't come. Until finally, the message she finally receives years later is when a messenger comes to them and says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. She's not even able to say her final Khuda Hafiz and Salam to her father. And then her heart is broken even beyond that, because over these years, she's made this connection to Imam al-Rida, her brother. And then Ma'mun takes him away as well, and now Bibi Masuma is all alone. And there is nothing more heartbreaking for a true mu'min and a true Shia to have their wali and their imam pulled away from them. That should be the most heartbreaking thing for us, is having our imam kept away from us for so long. And to say, Imam, we need to come running after you, the same way Bibi Masuma came running after you. And as Bibi Masuma made her way there and she lost her life, we recall, unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. And were left behind with all of these incidents. We remember that even in those difficulties and all of this tragic nature of what happened to her, there was the issue that she was, at least in her caravan, she was surrounded by her brothers. She was surrounded by her supporters, so she was not alone in her final moments. But whereas Bibi Sakina lost her father, when she moves over to Sham and she's taken over there, in her final moments, she's stuck there with the head of her father. Yes, Imam Sajjad is with her, Bibi Zainab's with her, but what a difficult time it was for her in these final moments where she doesn't really have her support. She wanted her Ammu Abbas, and Ammu Abbas is not there. Bibi Zainab was also looking for her brother, and that's why they say even Aunt Shami Ghariba, when she was there with a stick in her hand, defending and staying up all night, they say that she called out to Farad, say, Abbas, Abbas, look at your sister Zainab right now. Look at how she's defending the Ahlul Bayt. This is how the Ahlul Bayt defended wilayat. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
अब्बास तुझे ले वफा याद करेंगे, अब्बास तुझे ले वफा करेंगे, अब्बास तुझे ले वफा कैदों के बजे नौबत लश्कर में खुशी की, कैदों के बजे नौबत लश्कर में खुशी की, मसक़त में हुई जंगे हुसैन इब्ने अली की वाह याद अब्बास तुझे अब्बास तुझे ले वफा गाजी को जिगर मंदे अब्दुल्ला को मारा, अब्बास को भी कत्ल किया, शाह को मारा। आज तुझे अहले वफा याद करे, अब्बास तुझे अहले वफा हल कीजिए मुश्किल मेरी अवदे सितम है, हल कीजिए मुश्किल मेरी अवदे सितम है। अब्बास अली तुमको सकीना की कसम है, अब्बास तुझे अहले वफा याद करेंगे, अब्बास तुझे वफा याद। मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير الأعمال. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. محمد وعلى محمد صلوات.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي يعظم الظن من عبدك فليحسن العفو من عندك يا كريم. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. الله. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So many of you who have gone for ziyarah, one of the etiquettes and adab, I guess the cultures that they've started in many of the hawzats and many of the areas where you go for ziyarah, is that we obviously have to strengthen our ahkam, and it's tough in our daily lives to find out where to do that. So many places in between salah in the harams, they give short little ahkam lessons and reminders. So inshallah, since there's the largest group that I've ever seen, I guess, over here in a while, I figured might not be a good time just for one quick little ahkam lesson. Outside of the normal ahkam rules that we have for jama'ah prayer, right? We all know that obviously takbirat al-ihram you have to recite for yourself after the imam does. We all know that. The imam is the one who recites the surahs. Everything else is on the followers. But the method and the etiquette behind it matters as well too. And one of the adab of a jama'at or in a masjid or a center where people are offering ibadah is that there shouldn't be any adiyah. There shouldn't be any disturbance to people around, right? Our ibadah shouldn't get somebody else upset, basically, right? If that's what's happening, then you're not a real mu'min, right? Famous hadith says that a mu'min is somebody that everything is protected, right? So even their level of comfort should be protected, and we should be protecting one another like that. So when it comes for salah as well, one of the ahkam that many of you are probably aware of, but sometimes it slips our mind, is that we all know we're not supposed to be reciting out loud because we're following along. We whisper. But sometimes, our whisper, I don't know, the decibel meter might be off a little bit. So whispers turn into, I don't know, what is like a ghost or something like that. We're really whispering kind of loud there. So it's not haram to do so necessarily. Or let's say after Fatiha, you say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, for example. Or you're doing your dhikr in sujood or ruku or something like that. Yeah, you have to recite those yourself. But the idea is the whisper should be so quiet that you're the only person who hears it. If I'm able to hear you, that's an issue, right? Especially if you're back there and I'm somehow hearing you. I don't know what kind of whisper you got there, but it's like a shaitani whisper that you have going on over there. But if that happens, if your voice is so loud in the jama'ah, where even the imam can hear you, and again, this idea that it's also bothering people around you. If it's bothering me, it's probably bothering the guy next to you, right? Or the girl next to you. There should be girls next to you, by the way. But if that's happening, then they say there's kirahat there. It's reducing, again, we know for ibadat, if it's makruh, it just reduces the reward a little bit. And I know a lot of you're about the points game, right? You're just kind of collecting that sawab. So if that's what you're trying to do, you want to max out your points in Jamaat, then make sure that our whisper takes it down a few notches, inshaAllah ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now some guys are going to be whispering about me after this, I think, right? Astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu alayh. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, wa anna Aliyan hujjatullah alayhi salatu wassalam. Hayya ala as-salah, hayya ala as-salah, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala khayrin amal, hayya ala khayrin amal, qad qamat as-salah, qad qamat as-salah. Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. Astaghfirullah min kulli dhanbin wa atubu ilayh, innahu kana tawwaba. Allahu Akbar. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع له لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع له لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم واحشرنا معهم ولعن أعداءهم الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليكم الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم لا إله إلا الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه